Persona 5 Royal is the expanded and definitive version of the 26 classic Persona 5, also released on the PS4. Wait, let me check my notes. Grant! Hey Grant! You're telling me that Atlas is trying to sell Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 on the same system to the same people. Am I getting that correct? It is correct? Damn. Okay. But, I guess, is it worth it in 2020? The answer is yes. Just kidding. It really depends. Do you like turn-based RPGs? What about a 100-hour plus game? Have you already played the original Persona 5 on the same system? Well, because the game is a definitive edition of a relatively recent game released in the same console generation, we'll split the review into two parts. The first talking more generally about the game for people who haven't played the original, and the second with Persona 5 Royal specific changes that might make the game worth it over the vanilla version, or just worth it to play again. Timestamps are on the screen to the start of each part, as well as a concluding thoughts portion, so check out whichever is most relevant to you. Without further ado, let's get started with the Persona 5 Royal review. Persona 5 is a game about Japanese high school students fighting for justice in a world full of corrupt adults. Throughout the game, the protagonist, Joker, and his team of Phantom Thieves steal the hearts of the amoral citizens of the world and make them confess to their crimes. At its core, it's a game about how power corrupts, how the powerless are affected by distorted desires of the corrupt, and those affected fight for justice. Honestly, not unlike our society itself. Half of the game is spent fighting these adults in the metaverse, a distorted view of the world created in the minds of these corrupt people. And the other half is spent as a Japanese schoolboy. The metaverse is where the combat happens. Essentially, you sneak around the distorted world, or palace, searching for a path to the person's desire. On the way, you fight shadows. These fights are turn-based, but have a certain flair to them that make them all the more entertaining. In essence, you try to find their weak points, whether that's a certain element or a tactical hit, to take down the enemy. Once the whole group is down, you can either, kinda like Pokemon, choose to add the shadow into your party, or finish them off with a stylish all-out attack. The other half of the game is living life as a Japanese schoolboy. Like, literally, that's your mission. That means going to school, hanging out with friends, answering texts, exploring Japan, and even taking a test. So you better study up. And while you may ask, why would I ever want to study in a video game? Persona 5 Royal does a great job of balancing these day-to-day life simulator aspects with the crime-fighting action mechanics. Every action you do in the real world builds up skills and talents that link up to something in the metaverse. When building up knowledge, charm, guts, proficiency, or kindness stats, each of these unlock options to create new bonds with confidants in your team and around the city. When unlocking confidant levels, they give you access to extremely powerful skills that make battles more multidimensional and dynamic. These skills can range from passive experience sharing, to combo actions, to stat boosters, and more. Certainly, building these confidants for the skills they provide in battle is important, but it's also about creating and unfolding the relationships with each of them. Each confidant has a unique story followed through 10 vignettes where you learn about what they're going through, and you can just be a good friend and listener.
That bruise above your eye. Is that from practice?
There's small moments for sure, but they do a lot for characterization. They make each and every confidant, from teammates to city dwellers, feel real, like they have backstories. The game does a lot to make you feel connected to each one, to varying degrees of success. But this level of character development is surely unique in the industry. And if that's all not enough to pull you into trying the game, it's an aesthetic and musical masterpiece. I wouldn't do it justice with words. So instead, Grant, let's show them some B-roll.
All right, which one?
Honestly, just so beautiful. So those are the basics of Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal. What it's about, the battle system, world building and character development, and artistic value. If you played the original already, why would you want to return to this? Especially given that it's a 100-hour game, with many people likely already completing one or more new game pluses in the original. Admittedly, while there are new major features like a new semester and dungeon, as well as 2 new confidants and 1 new Phantom Thief, it would be a hard sell to push for playing the game again with just this. These new story elements are nice, but they are locked at the end of the game essentially, which means 80 to 90 hours plus just to get there. If you're cool with that, great. If not, that's also understandable. But I will say the developers at Atlas did a lot of small quality of life and story changes throughout that shape up the game for sure. Here are just some of the changes they made. A new intro sequence, a new title sequence, silhouettes for characters in the first mission, new character Kazumi portion in the intro, phone call portraits, new character portraits, earlier references to characters you meet later in the game, Kasumi specific scenes, gun mechanic changes so that you always have ammo but less of it, main characters living in the world, new windscreen, changes in baton passes, new persona, hints to make capturing enemies easier, experience given when capturing a persona you have, new enemy types, grappling hook mechanics, dungeon changes like will seats, UI changes, calling card calendar, changes in boss battles, confidant and skill boosters, pictures in text, thieves den, and more. While these don't necessarily make it an entirely new game or experience, it felt different enough where playing it a second time felt refreshing. Like I knew what to expect based on my first playthrough, but the changes were like little surprises along the way. Persona 5 is a special game for a lot of reasons, but it's also not perfect. For example, certain characters aren't as fully elaborated as others, making them into singular stereotypes. And there's no options to date the male Phantom Thieves, a big complaint by a large portion of the community. The base game also had tedious fights, certain overpowered mechanics, and more that either broke the game or made certain parts stale. Persona 5 Royal does its best to keep what made Persona a one-of-a-kind experience for players, namely the combat, aesthetics, story, confidants, and add to it while addressing some of the flaws of the first one. While also not perfect, it's still one of the best games to come out in 2020 so far, and worth picking up, whether you're new to the series or just returning to it.